there's ships on fire, who's setting them on fire? And as I began to study and seek and pray and look for God's direction, I began to understand that the match that starts these fires is in several individuals' hands. Sometimes it's in our hand. And last week was talking about some of the things that we need to set a fire to and get rid of out of our life. And today's part 2 of that message, a continuation of the match is in our hand. But then I also realize there's times that the match is in the devil's hands. And then there's also times that God is holding a match to our lives as well. And that's where the title for the series, Fire and Ashes, came from, because once fire has consumed something, all you have left is ashes. As I thought about even that simple title, I began to think in my mind that, wow, that really just represents a lot of destruction there, God. Destruction ain't a good thing. As I began to study and allow the Spirit to begin to move in me, I began to realize, yes, destruction can be a very good thing. And there's a lot of things that need to be destroyed. And so this is the series that we've embarked on. And today we're going to take the same thought process of last week of burning the ships. But there's another aspect to this that we're going to delve into. And so because of this, in my studying and research, I had come across a particular video. And when I was looking up information on burn the ships, and I found it very interesting because I said, hey, I know somebody that sort of is in their genre and their area of expertise. And so I went up to this person because they attend here, and I said, hey, would you mind, I asked them last week, I said, would you mind coming up to the pulpit and just speak for a few minutes about this particular subject? And they said, oh, okay. And a little tentatively, I said, and then when you finish, I'm going to go into the video, and it's going to make perfect sense. Well, this person, after the message last week, got home, started sending me some messages. Oh, wow, this is crazy. Now I understand all this kind of stuff. And they were excited. And this is a person that you would tend to think has to know what it's like to be calm under pressure. It's a different kind of pressure, though, isn't it, Sister Randy? I'm going to ask Randy to come up to the front, and she's going to speak for just a few moments about an idea of burning the ships and the idea of commitment for a little bit this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll be okay. Here, I'll make it better. Every time a pitcher's delivering a message, it's actually like someone, okay, come on.
Yeah, pitcher.
Here's the call.
Right.
Hit them all in the face. No.
All right, I'm going to try. So I just felt honored that Pastor Steve just asked me to talk about this, not because he chose me, but because of what he chose me to talk about. So for those who don't know, I play professional softball, and that is, if I was to ask people to raise their hand who knows that there is professional softball, there would probably be about 10 people in this room. Not a lot of people know that there's a professional softball league, and so for him to ask me to talk about it means the sport's growing, which is why, one of the reasons why I still play. Because to spread, to the younger generation that you can continue after college, that there's a league that you can go and play to pursue your dreams. Growing up, I didn't believe that I wanted to play professional softball. I wanted to go to college and get a degree and, help my parents out a little bit and play in college so I can get, some money to help pay for my school. If somebody would have asked me, 10 years ago, if this were where I would imagine myself to be, I would have said, you're crazy. I would have never believed at 24 that I would still be playing the sport and actually getting paid for it. A lot of these younger kids that I talk to, I get to say, I get paid to do this. I get paid to play something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I get to sleep in the off season, and I don't have to wake up to a 8 to 5 job. And so I consider myself very blessed to be able to do that. And so in order to play professional softball, you have to go and play 4 years at a college. You can go JUCO and then transfer to a 4-year university, but you have to play 4 years at college. You can't get drafted like my husband. Some of his teammates get drafted right out of high school. You can't do that in college or in professional softball. So I went to Texas State and I played 4 years there. I met Jonathan there, which is, a blessing in itself. And so a couple of the accomplishments that I had was I was high school player of the year, Gatorade player of the year. I was first team all-conference 4 times. I was 2-time pitcher of the year. I was a 2-time All-American. And the last thing, in 2018, my senior year, I was drafted in the first round, 4th overall pick to the Cleveland Comets out of Cleveland, Ohio. And so a little bit about this professional career. You say, whoa, she's a professional athlete. She makes the big bucks. No, I don't. I don't. Unfortunately, it's not a full-time paying job. I have to get a job in the off season to help pay for the bills. So in the off season, I give lessons to here in the center area, and that's just another form of me giving back. I think that growing up, you have idols and you have people that you look up to, and I continue to strive to be one of those every day, just a better version of myself for these younger kids to look up to. So a little bit about the professional career. We play 2 months out of the year. We play June and July, and we're traveling all over the U.S., playing almost a game every single day. And so there's 2 American teams, and the other 4 are international teams. So we're still not super big like the MLB is, but we just don't have enough funds, don't have enough money. It takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of commitment to what we do. But once again, I'm still doing something that I love to do every day. And so my first year, I was on the Cleveland Comets, but we were partnered with China. So I got to play with the Chinese girls who were representing their country, and they came over for the summer to play. Very difficult. They spoke no English. A lot of those kids, my sister's high school kids probably knew more than a lot of those kids from China, and we're playing at the professional level. So it was very eye-opening. Once again, I was considered myself blessed to be able to play and understand and play at the caliber that I am, because not a lot of countries have that. And then this past year, I played with Team Mexico, and that was a better experience for me. Of course, a lot of those girls are from the U.S. that are just representing their country, and they actually qualified last year to play in the Olympics. So this next year, in June, when we start playing, they're actually preparing to play in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which is pretty cool that I get to be a part of that in their preparation. And so I say it's a lot of commitment and a lot of sacrifices that we make. Another sacrifice that I have to make, as well as my husband who plays, we're apart 6 months out of the year. He's off pursuing his dream while I'm getting to pursue mine. And so in order for us to make our relationship work, we have to communicate daily, but the biggest thing that we do is we always put God first. Whatever we do, because we're on the road a lot, we don't have a home church. It's a lot of digging into our Bible ourselves, finding a church, pairing with other teams who are in that area that are more familiar with the area, and going up on a Sunday morning if we have time to go to that church. But it's a lot of it ourselves. We make a lot of sacrifices, and we could easily go out 2 months that I'm gone, or Jonathan's gone 6 months out of the year, and not do anything with the Bible, talking to God, nothing. But we always put God first, and making sure we're still giving our time to God, reading about God, just listening to God. And so we burn the ships to commit to our goal. We make a lot of sacrifices to be able to do what we do. But I wouldn't change anything. I'm lucky that I don't have to get a big girl job just yet. I love the game still. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'll close here by saying, one thing that Jonathan and I have always done in our relationships and our professional career is put God first and communicate daily and commit wholeheartedly to whatever we do, whether it's in our relationship, whether it's in our passion with playing sports. And we're so thankful and blessed for everything that, God has provided for us and blessed us with. I'm so thankful to be able to go play and travel the world. I've been to a lot of places, and it's all because of softball. But a lot of people don't see the sacrifices that we put into that. I'm thankful and blessed, but I'm also glad to spread that to the younger generation and just continue to push them to believe and go after their goals, that the sky's the limit. And, one day they might be in my shoes continuing to play past college. So, thank you.
Professional basket softball is back.
One, two, good.
Right now there are 5 teams in the National Pro Fast Pitch League. The Akron Racers are the oldest team in the league.
1, 2, 3, Racers!
I think that Racers' survival is rooted in the passion of Joey Arrieta.
I probably could do my own museum.
Joey, heart and soul,
is all racers.
Number one! Hey!
I think she tells me that she's proud of me more than my parents.
Joey has always kept the life in the Akron Racers.
This is the only facility in the country that was built specifically for women's pro sports.
Women's sports, unfortunately, doesn't get the support that men's sports does.
Our number one draftee this year will get paid 350 times less than the number one pick in the Major League Baseball's bonus. They aren't able to make a living as a National Pro Fast Pitch player right now.
We're only a part-time right now, and nobody can live off a part-time.
They all have different jobs. It's a great commitment on the part of these players to do this.
Are young women going to be making the millions? There's no guarantee to that. At some point, it's going to stop. You can only fight it so long.
It's heartbreaking to see these players that are having to make the decision and leave the game. It's a decision that women should not have to make.
Hopefully, someday, they won't have to worry about that. That's my dream.
It's our beginning. Now, nothing stops us.
You just have to have the years behind you. We have to survive long enough to be able to sustain that.
Don't settle for just playing the game. You put your heart on this diamond every night. That's what we do in Akron, because we play for a different reason.
There's a responsibility when those kids are looking you in the eyes and they're dependent on you.
This is your dream. This is your one opportunity to continue playing the sport you love.
We love the game. There's no one that's going to take that away from us. We fight for each other.
Nothing's ever given. Let's go. We knew it was going to be hard. That's why we play. So let's play with heart. Everything we got right here.
I don't give up. For me, that's not an option.
And I need that fire just to know that I'm awake.
So in my studies, I come across this video, and it's talking about the determination to go ahead, the commitment it takes. And to commitment to move in the front and forward also means the sacrifice of leaving something else behind, or really maybe even not even having anything behind to go back to. What kind of a commitment, what kind of a person is able to do those things? I believe it's something that throughout Scripture it finds out that that's where we are at. That's what we are called to do. We are always to be looking forward and moving forward. And if there is something back here to go to, we will always be tempted to go back. No matter how long we've pushed forward, no matter how long we've been making better of ourselves and progressing, we will find ourselves tempted to turn back. If you were here last week, you understand a little bit more about the phrase, burn the ships or burn the boats, that they even mentioned even in this video right here. It refers back to an incident where a commander, having landed in a hostile country, ordered his men to destroy their ships so they would have to conquer the country or be killed. There's no turning back. 2 years later, he succeeded in his conquest of the Aztec Empire. Can I tell you that just because you destroy what's behind you doesn't grant you immediate victory tomorrow? That sometimes it just means we have entered into the war, that the battle is real, and now is where the rubber meets the road, and we're going to see where we stand with our family, with our friends, in our business, with our relationship with Christ. Where are we going? What is our purpose? What are we trying to get out of this? Are we committed to this? This phrase, burn the ships, is associated in a variation of one that maybe you've heard of before, about burning bridges behind you. Now here's the thing, usually when somebody says that, there's usually addendum to that of saying, be careful, don't burn bridges. Why do they say that? They say that because the very thought behind it is you might have to go back that way. There ain't nothing. There ain't nothing. There ain't nothing worth going back to once you've went to Jesus. If something even tempts you, you better start doing some evaluation of your life and that relationship. Are you really able to sing and sincerely mean it? Oh, how I love Him. So the phrase today is usually a warning not to burn bridges. But I'm coming at it from a whole nother direction. When you decide to follow Christ, you better start burning some bridges behind you, or you're going to find yourself in the same gutter, in the same despair, the same hurt, the same loneliness. Everything you were trying to get away from is back there calling. And sometimes, as horrible as it is, you'll be surprised how tempting it is to go back. Every alcoholic knows that. Every gambler knows about that. Every person addicted to pornography knows that. Every person that's been consumed with more of this world knows exactly what I'm talking about. Some bridges have to be burned. The Vikings. And I'm not talking about football, even though today is Super Bowl Sunday. While I'm talking about that, let me just tell you, I forgot to tell you to put this slide down, Jason, so I'll just talk about it. I had a slide on my flash drive, and I forgot to tell him to put it up there. It shows the 49ers on one side and the Kansas City Chiefs on the other, Super Bowl trophy in the middle, and I titled tonight's message, yes, there's a message tonight, and I guarantee you it'll mean more to your life and your tomorrows than whatever the game's outcome is. I didn't hear enough amens on that. The message tonight will impact your life for your tomorrows much greater than the outcome of tonight's game will. Matter of fact, I would dare say you can't tell me who won the Super Bowl 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. You might not can even remember who actually won it last year. You don't remember who were on the team unless it was your team. But oh yes, we use a lot of things. So yes, we're having service tonight at 6, and the title is, I See a Victory. I see a victory. You see, the reality is this: if you're a 49ers fan, or the opposite happens, you can't stand the Kansas City Chiefs and you want the 49ers, you see a victory. But for every one of those, there's someone on the Kansas City Chiefs side, or they despise the 49ers, that they see a victory. And it's all because of who's on their team that they think they're going to win. Oh, do you see where there's a message in here? Tonight, if you come, you're going to end up leaving this service tonight seeing a victory, and it's because it's on who's on your team. And you see, their victory ain't going to pad your pocketbook unless you're doing something I would say you're not supposed to be doing. That's gambling on the game. So I'm just hammering y'all. All sides, ain't it? We're supposed to be a good steward of your money. But anyway, without that being said, we do have service tonight. The Vikings are not the football team. I'm talking about the actual Vikings from the Norwegian countries. They were conquerors from the north. And when the Vikings landed in new territory, the very first thing they did, they got on shore and they set their ships on fire. Burn them up. They burned their boats because they were committed to one thing. We're pushing ahead and we are taking this land. It's going to be ours. There's nothing to go back to. I don't want to go back. This is mine. It's been given me. I am here and I declare it and I'm going to take it. Now here's what happens in today. Well, that don't make no sense to burn your boats. That don't make no sense to do something like that. You know, I thought about that phrase when we say something like, well, that don't make no sense. There's going to be two places where we tend to say that the most. One is when we're looking at someone else's life. It's like, wow, that was really stupid. That was dumb. Why did they do that? That makes no sense. And you pictured some people when I just said that right there. We might have been picturing the same people, because some people, it's obvious to everybody what they do doesn't make any sense. But here's the other way we use that phrase. If it's not looking at somebody else and saying, well, that don't make no sense. The other time we think about this phrase is when somebody else tells me what to do. And the reality is it makes perfect sense, but I don't want to do it. I'll say, well, that don't make no sense. That gives me an excuse not to do what I probably should be doing, sort of like the information I gave about the Super Bowl a while ago. Well, that don't make no sense. You see, it would have made sense for Cortez to keep a ship or two. Why burn them all? Surely he should have, if he thought this out was logical, he should have kept a ship or two, or maybe even the whole fleet. But Cortez was on a mission, and he knew the only way to keep himself and his men from quitting the mission was to take that option completely off the table. Do you know if you have a backup plan, sooner or later you'll use that backup plan? Oh, but Pastor, shouldn't we be prepared? It depends on what you're prepared for. What are you prepared to do? What Cortez did was to force himself and his men, and he actually said this, was basically, we're either going to succeed or we die. Are you in it to win it? In your life for Christ? For your family? For your children? For your spouse? For your integrity? For your character? You see, when we make a commitment at the altar, it's an easy thing to say, Lord, I accept you into my heart. I know you died for my sins. It'd be so great if it just stopped right there. Everybody in this world would be saved. But you see, there's a commitment after that. Matter of fact, it happens like this. Lord, please come into my heart. Will you please save me? Oh, yes, son, I love you. I will. Thank you. I've knocked. You've opened. I'm in your heart. Oh, thank you. I feel so much better. Oh, wait, Steve. Wait. What, Lord? What is it? Let me get down off this cross a second. Carry it the rest of your time on this earth. Are you serious? They didn't tell me about that before. They said once I put my name on that card, that was it. Oh, they might not have said it, but I did. I said it. Ultimately, listen to me before your mama, before your daddy, before your children, before your banker, before your psychiatrist, before your doctor, and even before your pastor. Listen to me first. If what they say agrees with what I said, we got a home run. You can go with it. But if it don't, and you're deciding which one to believe, always believe me. Succeed or die. Lord, I'm with you all the way. I'm with you 100%. And if I die in the process, that's okay. Because I'm not going back. That's a life I can't have a part of me anymore. Retreat is not an option. To achieve the same success and victory in our life, we need to burn the ships. Here's the story told by another man. In case you're not familiar with the story, he does it in a little bit of a comical way.
There was a man in 1519 who set sail on the final leg of a voyage that was to take him from the shores of Cuba to the Yucatan Peninsula. He had in his employ 500 soldiers, 100 sailors, 16 horses on 11 ships. And they were going to take the world's richest treasure. It was a treasure of gold and silver and artifacts, jewels, that had been held by the same army for 600 years. Everybody knew about this treasure because army after army had tried to take it. Conqueror after conqueror had appeared with the forces and with the will to take this, but nobody had been able to do it. This guy, his name was Hernando Cortez, he was a conqueror, which, you know, to our way of thinking, this is a horrible thing. But back then, it was like a job description. You know, you could be a doctor, you could be a baker, and you could be a conqueror. You know, there were courses in it. And little kids would grow up wanting to be. And so anyway, Cortez was a conqueror. But he was a little bit different in his approach because he knew that time after time, people had gathered armies and nobody. So he had to gather an army whose level of commitment was beyond that which ordinary people consider commitment. So rather than just sign them up, he talked to them beforehand. He talked to them about what the treasure was like and what their lives would be like when they took the treasure and what their families and their generations of lives would be like when they took the treasure and how they were going to take the treasure and why they were different and what would be like that moment that they put their hands on. And so he laid a vision out for these people, for these men. And then they set sail. Well, halfway through the voyage, he realized he had a problem because a lot of these people who were so certain turned into whiners. You know, I mean, halfway across, you know, Mr. Cortez, we're not sure we should be on this ship at this time. It was amazing. And Cortez was like, and they got there. When they got there, they didn't just walk in and fight like conquerors had done in the past. He waited there on the beach You know, he gathered everybody on the beach and he made them listen to talks about what the treasure was going to be like. And he brought somebody up to talk about what their children would grow up like and how the children would grow up in favor and in wealth because of what they had done. He laid that vision out for them. And then finally, the day came that they were going to march in and take the treasure, and they gathered around. And as they gathered around, they grew quiet. And they were ready for the speech. They knew that this would probably be the speech where Cortez says, you know, you go here, we'll go here. If the arrows start flying, meet me at this coconut stump. We're out of here. But what he said was 3 words that changed everything. As they quieted down, he leaned in and he said, burn the boats. And they said, excuse me? He said, burn the boats, torch the boats. And they burned their own boats. As they quieted down, he leaned in and he said, burn the boats.
What a crazy thing to say when you're trying to take over another country. When you're trying to get your people enthused and excited about what's going on. But there's already complainers. There's already people that don't know if they should even be there to begin with. Last week we talked about the boats that we needed to burn was excess baggage. It could be our past. It could be problems we were facing, and that we're dragging all these boats behind us, and it's a drag on us. It's a burden on us. We can't maintain any progress. It's a lot of work trying to tote these things along. And God was calling us to take a match to these things, and we went into in-depth about a lot of the things. But this week, what the boats that need to be burned are not representing our past and our baggage. They represent our resources and our recourses. 2 very similar words, but with very different meanings. Our resources. Why would we burn up our resources? You see, when they burned up their ships, there was a lot of supplies on those ships. There was a lot of resources. There could have been medical things. There was food. There was clothing. There were things to probably use in warfare, some of the weaponry that they didn't bring all on the shore with them. So there was a lot of resources that could have done them a lot of good and been to their advantage, but they had to burn them up. Today, there's a lot of things in your life there's not necessarily wrong with them. There was nothing wrong with their food, their medicines, their extra equipment and supplies. But here's the problem, as our spiritual level is looking at it, is it was their resources. You will never be determined to get where God wants you to be and get what God wants you to have as long as you have your resources as a backup plan, something to turn back to. Why is it called faith? Because there's nothing to turn back to. We're moving forwards. And then recourses. Recourses is an alternate route. A different way to get there from here. So we have to burn our resources and we have to burn the recourses. I know I'm one of these methodical people that when something happens, an issue comes up, something I have to deal with, my mind immediately begins thinking of all my options that I can do this, this, and this. And if this happens, then I can change this to this and this and this. And I've got a map in my mind going 1,400 different directions. But if I'm really trusting God and say, God, I'm in this and I believe your promises and this is where you want me to be, I got to stop using my resources and depending on my recourses. I got to be committed to burn my ships to where the only way it's going to happen is if you do it, God. If you do it, God. Where's the spiritual application? Well, let's go back into the Old Testament. We find a story that tells us about the children of Israel being oppressed, pushed into slavery, God setting them free. And there's this mass exodus, and that's why the book is called Exodus. There's this mass exodus of the children of Israel. Where are they going? They have a destination. They've been promised a land flowing with milk and honey. They get to the shoreline. I'm tying our 2 thoughts together here. Their boats arrive at the shores of the promised land. They send out some scouts to check out the land, and they find it is just as God said. He said, man, there's clusters of grapes over there. And they're not genetically modified. They're God modified. And they are so big it takes 2 men to carry them on a stick. Oh man, it's amazing. It's a prosperous land. It's a great land. But then there were some people saying, oh, but there's giants in the land. And so they've explored this land. And you know where they're at? They're in the same place Cortez was. There's a promise of treasure, a land flowing with milk and honey. The blessings of God are awaiting. And now there's this crew. Half of them are upset. They don't want to go. They're ready to turn back and not follow through. And he needs to give them a speech to find out where they're going to end up. So now they're on the beach of decision. Today, some of you are going to find yourself on the beach of decision. You right now still have your boats you can go back to. And I'm trying to encourage you through the Spirit of the Lord today to burn those ships so you have nothing to go back to but to head into the arms of God and His promises. In Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 4, I've actually got these on the screen for you, and then some later on we're going to read the rest of this story, and Justin will bring up those scriptures. But this is what it says. It says, that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept out loud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, the leaders, the commanders. And the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in the wilderness. If only we had died in the ship at sea. We'd be better off than where we are right now. You see, right there, they're in between. They're between the punishment and the promise, so to speak, because they left the land of Egypt with its punishments. And then it goes on and says, why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? You see, the day of decision on your beach is going to be when there's a promise of the Lord out there, but there's something between you and the promise. Almost always there's going to be an enemy between you and the promise. There's going to be an obstacle between you and the promise. And because it doesn't look easy to get, you were expecting to just wake up one day in a hammock with somebody fanning palm branches over you and feeding you peeled grapes. It ain't turned out that way. You see the hammock, you see the tree, you see the person, you see the fan, but there's a gorilla between you and him. God, why'd you bring me here just to die? This is worse. Because now I can see it. It's right there. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children would be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? See, their boats are still there. There's still a path. There's still a way. We can go back to slavery. We can go back to death by the whipping in the hands of the Egyptians, to under the heavy, harsh rule of the Egyptians. We can go back. It don't make sense. It's stupid. But, oh, at least there we had a pot of vegetables. Verse 4, and they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Do you see the similarities in the story of Hernan Cortez? There were men there that thought the same thing. Hundreds of years people tried to overtake the Aztecs. It never happened. They always won. There's no sense in doing this. Let's get on our ships and get out of here. Let's turn back. Cortez is realizing this. Moses and Aaron realized this. I came across a quote. It was talking about commitment and promise, and it prompted me to think this, and this is my quote of this: commitment and the promise. You know, you've got a promise from God. This book is full of promises of God. The only thing lacking to get the promise is a commitment on our half. That's what's lacking. So if you've got commitment on my part, the promise of God on this part, it means that I must be committed to the promise. I am committed to the promise at all costs. No matter what I see, no matter what I feel, no matter what I think, the promise is real. It's mine. This word declares it. I'm committed to that, and I'm going to push forward till I get it. Committed to the promise. Retreat is easy when you have the option. Remember the story last week about the song of Burn the Ships. The lady was having a problem. She needed some medication. She got hooked on the medication. She calls her husband while they're on tour. You got to get back. I got a problem here. He comes back. He sees it's a problem because when she doesn't take it, she's shaking. She's having issues. They get her treatment, all this kind of stuff. But the pills were still at the house. And when she gets there, after 2 weeks of treatment, she goes in there, and I guarantee you, long before she called her husband into the room or she went into the room where her husband was, all of a sudden, seeing that bottle, the temptation was, you know what, maybe I could just take one or two occasionally when I need one, because there might still be problems ahead. But she realized retreat can't be an option, because once we start down that path, we're going to continue following it. And so she went out and told her husband, she said, I got to flush these down the commode right now. She said, and I have to watch it. You see, sometimes we have to see these things happen so we know it's real and we know its impact and we know they're gone. And that's when he thought of this story of Hernan Cortez, and he wrote the song, Burn the Ships. So last week we asked ourselves, what are my ships? The baggage that we had. This week the question is still the same thing. What are my ships? What am I afraid to let go of? What is it that I think I have to have or need? What is the resources I'm afraid to give up? What are the recourses, the alternate routes that I need to give up to show to the Lord and to show to myself I'm committed to the promise and I'm going to see it through to the end? What are those things in my life that I need to get rid of, that I'm depending on? Basically, it's whatever you depend on more than God. If you're depending on it more than Him, it needs to be gone. Because as long as it's there, it's a quick fix to your problem. Oh, I don't see no solution here. It's really strong. Oh, I feel so much better. Remember the phrase, burn one's bridges? This expression is derived from the idea of burning down a bridge after crossing it in a military campaign. That's where it originally came from. Had to do with military things, leaving no choice but to continue the march. Figuratively, it means to commit to a particular course of action by making any alternative courses impossible. It relates back to a story with George Washington when General George Washington was commander. It said he was approaching one of the fiercest battles of his campaign. He and his troops had crossed over a bridge as they were nearing the battle when one of his officers came to him and asked whether they should burn the bridges behind them that they had just crossed. It was customary to burn the bridges as they crossed for two reasons. One makes sense. Actually, they both make sense, and we might use these excuses. One was so the enemy couldn't sneak up behind them. With the bridge gone, the enemy couldn't reach them, but also it kept their troops from running away and hiding and trying to escape. The great General Washington looked towards the battle, and then he looked back to the bridge from where they had came and back towards the battle and then back to the bridge. He said, burn the bridge. It's either victory or death. We don't say this much, but our relationship with Christ is a live or die relationship. You're either in it for the long haul and committed to the end. There's no separation, no divorce, no backing out. It's 100% gung-ho till the end. Or we're not in a relationship with Christ. Another commentary about this phrase, burn the ships, says it this way. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernando Cortez landed in Mexico on the shores of the Yucatan with only one objective. And this is the reason I read this particular quote from this particular observation of that story. He had one objective: to seize the great treasures known to be there, hoarded by the Aztecs. To seize the great treasures. Can I take you back to the book of Numbers? They had a promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. The treasures of God, the promises of God. Hernando Cortez had one goal. I'm going to get what's there. That treasure is mine. It belongs to me. This commentary said Hernando Cortez had one idea: seize the great treasures that are there. It was reminded of a little phrase that we say sometimes. But if I said it, it might mean one thing. But if The Rock says it, you might think different. This was a trailer for a project he was involved in.
I always wondered what was out there.
I told the guy like what's next for me.
The future destiny intervene on my behalf. It's a whole other level. Boss man.
I'm just fulfilling my destiny.
Where are you these days? Some exotic locale?
I'm just fulfilling my destiny. The death of me.
We've got 3 billion riding on this.
People don't just hand things over. You've just got to take it.
I'm just fulfilling my destiny.
To the victor go the spoils.
I took the ballot was next for me.
Oh, that's applicable in your Christian walk with Christ. There is a lot of spoils of the kingdom. There's a lot of treasures to the kingdom. And like we used to say, every promise in the book is mine. Every chapter, every verse, every line. It's mine for the taking. Emphasize on taking. Because the flesh don't want to pay the price to get it. The enemy of your soul is going to do everything he can to fight you to get it. But to the victor goes the spoils. And as we will find out tonight, I see a victory. We get all the spoils because we are always victorious. We will end up with all. You know, I've read this before in little memes before. He who dies with the most toys wins. That's the Christian. We die not only with the toys, but the game board, the arena, the field. We get everything. To the victor goes the spoils. So what happens if you don't win? You get leftovers. You see, the Christian that's not committed, oh, that leftover is good for a time or two, but even eventually, even us meal planners know that, right? By day 5, what tasted so good on Monday, you eating the same thing on day 5, it ain't so good no more. I remember one time, Jeremy, he was at the house, and he just had this little bit of chicken and rice, grilled chicken and rice. Like 45 minutes later, he's still eating this little. And he put it in his mouth, he chewed, and it's almost like he was about to throw it. I said, what is wrong? He said, it almost makes me sick to eat it, because they had been eating it for so long and long. Are you tired of eating the junk you've been eating? There's a land flowing with milk and honey, and the promises are there, and you're on the beach of decision, and the only reason you don't have it is because you refuse to burn up your boats, your backup plans behind you, and commit your ways to Christ. 100% all the way. I could go on without saying a lot of things, but we're committed to Christ in our Bible reading, in our Bible study, in our devotions, in the songs we select to listen to, in how often we go to church. All these things are part of our commitment to Christ. We fall so short in the time we've been allotted, percentage-wise, to how much we actually give to Christ. Hernan Cortez was determined to be the first to conquer the Aztec Empire and seize their treasure. He could see his army wavering. His soldiers weren't fully convinced they could win and would rather return to Spain than risk their lives. The children of Israel weren't convinced they could win, and even though there was a land of milk and honey, they didn't want to fight and were convinced the best thing to do was go back to Egypt. So Cortez gathered his men together to give them one last motivational speech before combat, and this is where we go back to our scriptures. Justin, if you'll do, Numbers 14, we'll start at verse 5 there. We're going to go through 10. This is immediately after the people have made this decision. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and He will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land." Can I just stop right there? That's a powerful sentence right there. If you choose not to go to the promise, you're a rebel. Read that. Sometimes I'll see somebody put something on Facebook and say, "You read that again." Then you read it again. So read that again. They decided they want to go back to Egypt. Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb, they're answering those people back and say, "Hey, God's given us this, So don't rebel against the Lord. Do you consider yourself a rebellion? Probably not. But you are if he's saying, this is what I got for you, this is what I want for you, I have paid the price for it, I have given it, this is the way, come in, I'll give you victory. And no, that's okay, I'll just do this instead. His words, not mine. And do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Stop being afraid of what you're facing. God is with you. You need to be afraid of what's behind you and what you're wanting to go back to. That's where fear is. That's where death is. That's where destruction is. Verse 10, but the whole assembly talked about stoning them. You see, Cortez was facing the same situation. When he said burn the boats, he probably wondered, what are they going to do? Everyone expected a passionate talk from Cortez about the fame and the riches. But instead, they just heard those 3 words, burn the boats. Here's a little video reenactment on how that might have looked in that day.
There is a legend of an ancient commander. He ordered his men ashore, leaving only a single sentry aboard each of his ships. His soldiers were about to face an army that far outnumbered his own. But the commander knew that fear itself was the greater enemy. It was his belief in their courage that inspired him to act, that inspired him to remove even the possibility of retreat.
My men have courage in their hearts. Victory lies within them. How can I unleash it? Burn the ships! Burn them all! There is no retreat! We will not leave these shores alive! Unless we win! We either triumph or we perish!
And when they did,
like I said earlier, 2 years later, they had total victory and domination over the Aztec Empire and started the colonization of entire South America. No backup plan, no second option. So they fought for their lives. We'll fight for our lives for a lot of things, but we won't sometimes do it for our Christian walk. Where we draw the line, say, well, I'll go this far, but then, I got to stop. So why does this story matter to us today, Pastor? You see, it's because to burn the boats has become a synonym for making a drastic decision that cuts off all other options. If you really want to fully commit to something, there's no better way to do it than to eliminate all the alternatives. If there's no way back, you have to move forward or die. You can't have your own resources. You can't have your own recourses. It's follow all the way. You see, we started this message out today with the commitment of a young lady that throughout her life just like many other kids involved in sports or music or anything like that. They're committed to being the best they can possibly be, and automatically that means there's a lot of things they have to sacrifice behind them to keep pushing forward. Then we went into a video about the whole professional softball league and how it's struggling, but that the leaders of it and the organizers of it are committed to win this time, and it's all out, and it's a lot of sacrifice. It means they have to give up family and friends and relationships and to an extent even finances, because the finances are so low, but there's a commitment to win. You see, having a comfortable alternative rather than taking action, if it doesn't cause us to turn back, it'll cause us just to stay where we're at. And that's not an option either. The Spanish soldiers couldn't stop thinking about returning to their home country, and thus they weren't fully focused on the mission ahead of them. You see, sometimes our mission is too much about ourselves and our ways. We can't focus on what God wants. But I can stand here and tell you today that in my experience of my own life and watching the lives of those around me that were committed to Christ, there's no better option out there. It is the best option for you. It's the only place you'll find peace and contentment and satisfaction. I was listening on the radio going to work for a little bit yesterday morning early. And he was talking about how people look to this world to satisfy their life, but that whatever they think in front of them that will satisfy, when they finally attain it, they find out there's no satisfaction there. It's only the things that God has designed for you and promised to you that's going to give you the satisfaction that you want and desire and need in your life. And he's just waiting on you to be committed to it, that you're willing to drop something to the side and say, okay, it's all or nothing, God. I'm just going to go for it. Sometimes we use the saying, going for broke. These soldiers needed to burn the boats before they were willing to fully commit. I want to read those quotes that I read to you up again earlier. The one that said, commitment and the promise means we must be committed to the promise. And the other one is that the boats we need to burn are our resources and our recourses. There was another one that I sort of looked over just a moment ago, and this to me was amazing. In my study, I came across, and a pastor, this was actually the title to his message. It was really long, but I did put it in here because I thought this is such an excellent way to once again have a correlation between what we're talking about today, and this is what the title to his message was: Better to die in the land of promise than to live in the land of despair. The land of want. Sometimes we may even die there. We may die in the process of getting it. But because of that commitment, we're still victorious in the end, and we have the ultimate treasure because now we have received our great reward, which is heaven. Once you commit to such extremes of burning your boats, the safety net's gone. So what's God asking you to do today? The same thing I was going to do this last week and I forgot. He's asking you to pull out these matches and burn your boats. You hold the match. Next week we're going to talk about the devil holding the match, and a week after about God holding the match. It would be nice if we could just say, God, I need this gone. I want it out of my life. And there's sometimes he's gracious enough to do that. But you see, somewhere along the line, you have to make decisions. You have to make commitments. You have to take the action. You know why? Because it's easier to let somebody else do a lot of our stuff. And God's saying, you have to show me your commitment. I'll give you everything you need to destroy that boat. I'll provide the fuel, the flammable things that it's required. I'll even put the matches in your hand. But the truth is, you need to take it and walk over to that and say, Lord, you're more important to me than this is. I'd light it up, but I'm scared I'd drop the match on this carpet. I should have got some plastic up here because then I would have done it. Shame on me. We can replace carpet? There you go, John, light up. Light it up. So as I bring this to the close, are you trusting God with the battle and His promise that there's treasures that await ahead of you? You see, there's kingdom blessings. This book is full of what's called kingdom blessings. And the kingdom blessings are really for here on earth. Heaven is our ultimate blessing there, but the kingdom blessings deal with the kingdom that we're in here, right here. There's a promise for you right here, right now, that you need in your life. That's why He's provided it. But there's going to be a fight on your hands. There's giants in the land. There's storms, clouds on the horizon. There's things that are going to try to take you out. But God has promised to be with you. But He needs you to destroy the path behind you, the recourses and the resources that you have trusted in so long. I'm going to say this before we watch this video. I wasn't going to. As I'm preparing a message, I'm thinking about that message constantly. So from like Friday till this morning, till I left my office, all about the message. I'm stepping into the shower this morning thinking about the message. Even though I had already printed it up, typed it up, so I had to handwrite these things down. But God showed me something, and it was so powerful. I said, whoa, that is so prominent, so big, so obvious. Why haven't I ever seen that before? You see, what this boils down to is faith. This is a whole story about faith. Do you have faith that you can march on and get the victory that's been promised to you? And as I was thinking about that aspect of faith in this, because, to burn these things means I have to have faith because I have nothing to go back to. There is no other option. So I am totally putting my faith in God. And it was like all of a sudden I seen this, and I have preached this so many times before, and I'll probably say it again. Oh, the step of faith. The first step of faith is the hardest. Just step out. And they'll say, oh, faith is putting the foot on the first step when you don't see the staircase. Faith is stepping off the edge of the cliff when you don't see that. And God said, no, the first step of faith is burning my resources and my recourses. So I have no option. My first step of faith is not frontwards. My first step of faith is backwards. Because until that's destroyed, I can step out here, but I got something I can go back to if this don't work. So I haven't really used faith. Not as long as I have a backup plan, another course of action, something else that I've built up that I trust in, I am never really taking faith. If I've got something else I can go back to. So I think the Lord's calling you to your first step of faith today. And it's not towards Him. It's to your past, to your baggage, to your boats. So there's nothing to go back to, and you only end up with Him. Something I love is when I minister, share videos or whatever, and somebody says that they get something out of it that I didn't even see. As we close with this video that we used last week, and I might show it every week, Landon brought up something to me that I thought was strange all the time. Is that this video starts off with somebody on the shore who rows out to the boat, gets on this boat. Now there's two of them. This other person actually lights it, and they both jump off and they swim back to shore. When they're on the boat, it almost looks like they're mad at each other. Landon said, I said to him, I was so busy getting the words and typing them in, I noticed that, but I thought, well, that's strange. Why is this guy mad at him? And what it's supposed to be is one of two things. This person that rows out to the ships is either you and I, an individual, and we're rowing out to the ships of someone's life. And in this story, that's what this represents, because it was his wife that was having the addiction problem, and he had to help her blow up those ships to move on. But sometimes it's God. And so when he gets on the ship, there's a little bit of an expression on the other person, because that person doesn't want their ships burned. That person's afraid. That person doesn't have faith. But then they realize it has to be done. That's what's best. So the ship's lit on fire, and they both jump in the water, and they go on, they reach land. The person whose ship that was, even though the song's saying don't look back, tends to look back one last time, you see, because that's human nature, that's the flesh. But the person that rescued them just keeps marching on. The person that represents that best friend, or in many instances, God. So as we watch this, and you've heard this message today, and you know if God's been speaking to your heart this morning, understand He's there with you. When you turn around to light that ship up, He's there. When you jump off the ship, He's there. When you get to the island, the beach of the promised land, He's there. And when they head off into the forest, into the unknown, He's leading you and directing you. There's nothing to fear. We don't need to fear God. We need to fear what's behind us. Watch this as we get ready to close. Every head bowed and every eye closed. Last week, I didn't ask for any kind of response from the congregation, and sometimes I do that, and sometimes I do. I'm not going to have you come to the front, but I do want a response today. Because these are very hard decisions to make in life. It's not easy to admit we have to have something. That we're afraid to move forward without some kind of firm foundation under our feet, and to totally trust God can be one of the scariest things you ever do in your life. It could be a business decision, it could be a financial decision, it could be a health decision, it could be a family decision. It might be a spiritual decision today that you're having to make. You know you need to, that it's what's best for you. You know there's a promise waiting on the end, but there's just a fear holding you back. It's easy to always have this option back here, this safety net, this boat, this resource, this alternate path. But you would say that through the message today that God's been speaking to your heart, and there's an area, and that's between you and God. But by raising your hand in just a moment, you're going to say, this might be one of the hardest things I do, but I know I need to do it. And so I want God to know that I'm willing to take the match and do this. I just really need Him to come alongside because I am scared to death. With every head bowed, every eye closed, now's the time I'm at. Would you say that's you this morning? Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hands still going up, thank you. He's an amazing God. He will never take you where He will not go with you. So part of this song that I love, it says, we can dance upon a heartache. I love that little phrase. Because what we think is going to be so destroying, so hurtful, so damaging, the thing that we can't stand the thought of even coming close to, when He's with us, the victory allows us to dance on that thing. That is so cool. Just want to pray with you that God will send His Holy Spirit to be with you, that this step that you are making, I'm not going to pray that it's not uncomfortable, because I think that's part of faith. If it's too comfortable, we don't need a lot of faith. You know, there's so many things that we desire that really are the opposite of what we need or what has to happen. But I'm asking that with bold determination, listen to this commitment. We either succeed or we die. That's sort of a scary statement, and you've basically said that today. Not to me, not to those standing around you, but to Him. Lord, I'm in it to win it. I'm going for broke. It's all or nothing. I want what you have for me, because the best I can do for me doesn't even come close to what you've got for me. And there's a treasure that can be seized, and I'm not going back to Egypt. I'm not going back old ways. I'm not going back to my old life. My dependency is not on the things of this world, but upon you and your Holy Spirit and upon your word. This morning I'm going to pray for you, and maybe you didn't raise your hand, but I'm going to pray that you have the strength to light that match anyway. Dear Heavenly Father, this morning, what a privilege to have a God like you. God, you've already wrote the story. You finished it out. You know everything that's going to happen. And you lay it before us. But God, since we can't see the ending, we just see what's between us and the ending. We have a lot of fear. There's a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of doubt. Lord, we follow you, we love you, but my goodness, can't you reduce that? Can't you change the circumstances a little bit? And Lord, sometimes you do. But Lord, today you are calling some of us right now that there are things in our life. And Lord, like I said, those things on the ship, they were good things. It wasn't that they were burning up sin, wrongdoings. They were burning up food and clothing and things to provide shelter and things to fight the enemy. The problem is their focus was on that. It was their resources, their help, their other options. God, sometimes we don't necessarily have to give them up. I think you're telling someone today that they are so afraid to do this, but what your Spirit is trying to say, if you will just take the match and light it and turn like you're going to do it, I will know that you are doing this wholeheartedly. You might say, well, Pastor, ain't that sort of taking the thing away? No, it's sort of like Abraham. He never had to sacrifice Isaac. He had to go through the motions and be willing to do it. The thing is you don't know if God's going to stop you before you light it up or not. But by that moment, God has seen your heart, whether you're sincere or not. You see, so many times, the thing we're afraid to give up, He lets us keep it anyway. And if He doesn't, and He takes it away, do you know He's the God of Job? Who doubled what he had before he gave up what he had. This day, Lord, as they stood before you and they raised a hand, that was a courage moment. That was a hand me the match moment. I pray that they will follow it through and trust you to the end of the promise, that they will seize the treasures of the promised land. That in their decision they would rather die in the land of promise than live in the land of despair. You will bring it to pass because that is who you are. And we will give you the glory for it. In Jesus' name, amen.